joined with our regular visitor Dave Hale from the Sheppey Horticultural Society. Dave, what sort of plants can you be planting this time of year? Although I guess a lot of plants are probably already in flowers. Is it more the case of vegetables at this time of year?
I think you're absolutely right. You've hit the spot where that's concerned. In fact, funnily enough, earlier today I did some canvassing around colleagues on the sites, thinking what really can go in at this particular time of the year, and they were all a bit scratching their heads because, as you quite rightly say, a lot of the flowers, a lot of the blooms are coming to fruition now. Your garden should be full of this kind of thing. Your allotment or plot, whatever you've got, should be full of that sort of thing, the really colourful stuff. But I suppose everybody sort of gravitated towards the vegetable side of it. Things like spring cabbage. Now I say spring cabbage because that should really be planted at this time of the year, ready for you to eat early next year. Late carrots is another one as well. You might like to, people might like to put some late carrot seeds in, just to see what happens. My wife put some in yesterday morning, having noticed that our carrots bed was totally catastrophic. So she's giving it another go, in effect. Salad vegetables is one of those things. Lots of people are eating lettuce or cut and come again type salad vegetables. There's no harm in actually continuing with those kinds of things. Beetroot you might like to try. Lots of people might. Of course, if you like beetroot, which I must admit personally I do, not a lot of people, or not. How can I say this? There are people who don't necessarily like beetroot, but beetroot at this time of the year, you'll get a repeat sowing. Those kinds of things. But some bedding plants, yes, will still go in. They're still being sold at garden centres and nurseries. Fine, but get them in quickly and copiously water them, because as we're aware, it's summer. Those kinds of things will need water to sort of set roots down. What you're looking for is a plant which is able to really set its roots down very quickly, so keep it watered. Transplants which have been grown from pots, like, for instance, I have lots of pelargoniums in my garden. Those kinds of things, if you want to get them out of the pot and take them onwards, in fact, make them get bigger, put those in the ground as well. So we're talking about transplants. It's more on the vegetable side, I would venture to suggest, rather than the bloom side. You should be enjoying those now in their full bloom.
Dave, what can you be getting on with in the garden and the allotment over the next couple of weeks?
Here comes my second fun of the evening, or bad joke actually, rain permitting, of course, if it doesn't return. I think it's very much tidy up time and cutting back the plants that have lost some vigour, those which bloomed earlier. We were talking about just now, actually, about those that blooming earlier. Finding again those plants that have been covered over by the more vigorous ones. You'd be surprised how many plants disappear. Oh, that's where it went. And you find that it's travelled a couple of feet to find light on of its own accord. Keep up with the watering, but I would suggest that people do that early in the morning or later in the evening, because the plant is able to take up more of the water when it's cooler. The other thing, of course, about that is water the roots, not the foliage itself. It needs it at the root. So water the roots. Feed plants regularly, and it'll come. Many people have their own preferred fertilisers and their own sort of things that they want to actually use, whether it's natural or organic or inorganic. As many of the plants will have used up the nutrients which have been in the soil, and especially those plants which are in pots as well, they'll need a lot of feeding by now to keep them going, because that's the whole point. You want to keep them going for as long as possible. Check for pests. Black fly, green fly, and diseases, those kinds of things, and treat and deal with those accordingly, specifically green fly and black fly. Although I have seen quite a few ladybirds around recently, so they're able to munch through quite a sizable amount of black fly. So if you see one, stick it on a plant, put it that way. Those are the kinds of things that you should be doing over the next week or so. Deadheading for repeat flowering. Lots of flowers, as I've just mentioned, have already gone over. Deadhead them, and you'll get repeat flowers, hopefully. Cut back geraniums. They'll get a new flush of growth. I'm talking about the geraniums which you would grow in the garden. My apologies, sir. Not the pelargoniums, the bright red ones that you were talking about. The geraniums themselves. Cut those right back to the ground if you're growing these geraniums, and they will actually come back again, and they'll give you a completely new flush of growth, actually, also prolonging the season. Pick sweet peas, for instance. A lot of sweet peas are now coming into flower. They're absolutely beautiful. They smell wonderful. keep picking them, because the moment it flowers, virtually the whole business, or the raison d'etre of a sweet pea flower, is actually to put the pea pod behind it. In effect, the flower is the thing that you're actually looking for, so cut them back as close to the stem as you can actually get them. Put them up in water in the house, they'll smell beautiful, you'll get a repeat flowering. So it's all of those kinds of things which are actually coming on. For allotmenteers and vegetable gardens, it's arguably the best time of the year, seeing your earlier labours come to fruition and eating what you've actually grown. I say this very often, but that's really the raison d'etre for growing vegetables. You're going to eat them rather than just look at them.
After watching them grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're thinking, nobody's getting that. I'm having that one. And another thing, of course, that leads us nicely on to slugs and snails. You've got really to keep looking out for them, even though we've had some dry weather recently. Slugs and snails are still about, actually. So it's be prepared in your garden. There's lots of things that you can still actually be doing.
We are talking to Dave Hale this evening, our regular visitor from the Sheppey Horticultural Society. We catch up with Dave normally once every couple of months here at the Monday Night Community Show. You are listening to the Monday Night Community Show, and we're joined with Dave Hale from the Sheppey Horticultural Society. Dave, looking a little bit further ahead, what can you be getting on with over the next couple of months to come?
I'm going to diversify away from the plants themselves towards the little helpers, the gardener's helpers. Insects like ladybirds, lacewings, all of those kinds of insects. One of the things which I have built now is they're called ladybird houses. What they are, they look a bit like bird boxes.
Right.
But what they have the ends of bamboo, odd pieces of bamboo stuck in endwise, which allows the ladybirds and the lacewings to climb into them and to literally stay there for the winter. So that's something you can be getting on with now, ready for when everything starts to hibernate and starts to slow down, in effect. So I've got them all around and about the garden. Clean out your bird boxes, because birds will have nested in them.
Yep.
It's a good idea, so that you're not proliferating diseases, in a sense, because you want the birds back next year, because again, they are your helpers, in effect. Pick your plants, or pick your vegetables again. Enjoy your garden and plot, because you've worked hard for it throughout the previous months. It's time to sit and relax and reflect. Pruning, those kinds of things, you'll need to think about as well. So there are lots of things that you can actually do. As I said, the ladybird boxes, the insect boxes, the cleaning out of the birds' nests or the bird boxes themselves. Lots of things you can do, as I say. Don't leave old leaves and dead material lying about. It could introduce diseases and pests to your healthy plants. We were just talking about vine weevil, for instance. It's and the lily beetle as well, which is an absolute pest. It really is. It's this bright red little beetle that you will see on your lilies, and wonder where all the holes have come from and why you don't have any leaves left on your lilies, simply because the lily beetle has gone through them, with it and the larva that it's left on your lilies. I have no compunction about killing them whatsoever, because what do you prefer? Do you want your lilies, or do you want them to leave them as food for this pest, actually? Vine weevil is another one as well, little black beetle, which will crawl all over your potted plants. Unfortunately, that will leave its larva in the soil, so you sometimes really don't know that you've got a dying plant until it actually keels over. All of those kinds of things you should be looking at now and thinking about now, ready for the time when, I hesitate to talk about the autumn now, but it's that time to start planning towards the autumn, in effect, even though summer is hopefully not yet gone by a long chalk. So those kinds of things you can be thinking about for the next couple of months, in effect. But basically, enjoy the summer, enjoy the garden, enjoy picking your blooms, enjoy eating the vegetables.
Dave, do you have any useful tips for us this evening?
I think we may have covered some already, actually, but things like continuing to protect your fruit against the birds. I must admit, my own personal experience, I protected the gooseberries, I protected the blackberries, and forgot the red currants, and would you believe it, I ate all the red currants, the ones that I said I was going to protect. Watch for signs, any other pest damage, and deal with that promptly. I think we may have mentioned that already, actually. I say this almost on an annual basis. My apologies, but I make no apologies for it. Make sure your cutting tools are sharp and they're fit for the purpose. Blunt, dull tools cause accidents. You'd be surprised at the number of accidents there are actually in gardens, in your own garden. Cut fingers, cut hands. Don't forget to harvest, pick your edible crops regularly. Courgettes, I've been picking marrows, which started out as courgettes at the beginning of the week, simply because I couldn't get to the plot. As it gets hotter, don't forget that the air needs to be cooled in your greenhouse, if you have a greenhouse or your growing tunnel. And spraying with water on the floor helps to keep it cool, helps to keep it running much more smoothly. Hang some sticky pheromone traps in your fruit trees. There's nothing worse than actually biting into an apple and finding you've got codling moth in it or something like that. You know, some of the nasty which are bored into it and you have no idea. And it spoils the apple for you. Keep hoeing, weeding regularly. That's very important this time of the year, actually. I think I haven't seen my plot for about 4 days this week. And the vegetables are coming on wonderfully. So are the weeds.
Yeah, the weeds do seem to be growing fairly fast at the moment, actually.
I hesitate to use the word fairly. I think very fast. They seem to have taken over. So most of my Sunday morning was spent weeding and hoeing all the stuff out rather than tending to the plants, simply because they're trying to get back on top. So for every plant I've got, there's a few hundred weeds probably. Makes it sound awful. Keep hoeing and weeding regularly. Let weeds with seeds die first before you add them to any compost heap. So if you are actually weeding, don't put them straight onto your compost heap, because no, let's say, back garden compost heap is really going to get that hot to kill off all the seeds. So those kinds of things. Hold on a second. I went through some other people's things, so my apologies. Clematis. Rather than trying to actually make cuttings of it, layer it. It's much easier. For instance, you just lay it down, lay some few feet further on, lay it into the ground, cut it very, very slightly underneath, and you'll have another clematis, basically. It's much, much easier, rather than trying to take softwood or hardwood cuttings off clematis. Those kinds of things, which I think, hopefully, are useful tips for your listeners.